This is the Dzogchen Semde Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. It is Obi-Wan Kenobi early Wednesday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after our opening explanation. What if enlightenment was as simple as mastering the Buddha's eightfold path? So I'm going to do my best to push the right button in the right sequence. Let us begin with the first fold of the path, which is the right view of impermanence, no self, and emptiness. What if practicing this, what if the most efficient way to practice this was to do so as the effortless fringe benefit of authentically practicing mindfulness and meditation? There are many stories about mindfulness and meditation. Many of them contradict each other. I find it's most useful to view the topic of mindfulness and meditation through the metaphoric lens of neuroscience. Let us begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord, also known as the core of our autonomic nervous system. The middle bit of our spinal cord, which functions as the core of our sympathetic nervous system, which has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way, to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice all mind's antics of perception. You know, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like, including the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, and imaginings. All of them. From the good, the bad, and the ugly. Everything from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. But what are we to do with that which we have noticed? In a word, meditation. You see, every time we exhale, again, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access both the tippy top as well as the very bottom of that exact same spinal cord. These two regions, working as a team, function as the core of our parasympathetic nervous system, which in turn has evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void. Now, Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, and that suckiness could look like Yang's religious patriarchy, also known as institutional Buddhism, where being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel are always in fashion, and people become so rigid that they forget that words can have more than one meaning. And there are, in addition to literal phrases, there are figurative phrases. So let us consider, we can tell that this is written as a simile because the preposition as is repeated. Now, I had the very good fortune to be taught that a simile is only as useful as it is relatable. Therefore, we have to ask the question, what? What is a real-world example of a non-graspable vast empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless day, which although could look tantalizing to the eye, feels non-graspable to the hand? Great, we understand that emptiness is not something literal to be believed in or understood, but is simply a figure of speech to help us understand a fleeting experience latent within every exhalation. What about the puzzle of no self, or not self, or selflessness, or if we prefer Pali, anatta? Once again, that is just a metaphor. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever labeling or sense of self we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even less graspable. And so we see that it's not a question of getting rid of self. It's a question of cooperating with our central nervous system, which forces us to vulnerably recognize that sometimes during our inhalation, we will experience a sense of self, and during our exhalation, that sense of self could fade. You see, the purpose of meditation is not to change what we perceive. It's to help us to process what we perceive. Not make it go away, but process it in such a manner that that which we perceive ceases to pull our puppet strings, making us dance like a marionette. So let's return to Enlightenment's Eightfold Path of Proto-Buddhism. We've already explored how authentically playing with mindfulness and meditation as little as once every 12 hours can cause us to master the right view of impermanence, no self, and emptiness. But as we read these eightfolds, we don't see any mention of vows or rules or ethics or morals or warnings of bad karma and punishment and promises of good karma and reward. How are we to know what to do? Simple. Loving kindness. How important is loving kindness? It comprises 50% of Enlightenment's Eightfold Path of Proto-Buddhism. The Buddha taught that there are 4 bases of mindfulness: the mental, the interpersonal, the physical, and the circumstantial. How are we to bring these 4 into the path of loving kindness? The answer again is found in neuroscience. When we make the mistake of going along with the crowd, who tell us to actively focus and actively analyze, we run the risk of so exhausting the front of our brain, so exhausting our dorsolateral medial prefrontal cortex, that we trigger our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression, which is a drag, isn't it? But here's the good news. The more we cooperate with both facets of our autonomic nervous system, the more the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala is calmed, and the more the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus is gently stimulated. Pretty cool, eh? You see, this is why the late Karma Chakme Rinpoche taught that the essence of all vows, the essence of all morality is simply non-violence. This is exactly why the late Tulku Thondup insisted that the highest love is the spontaneous, uncontrived byproduct of mindfulness and meditation. Simply by playing with noticing and relaxing in harmony with our breathing, we cannot help but practice kind intention, kind communication, kind conduct, and even kind commerce. Spontaneously abandoning competition and cruelty and relaxing into cooperation and kindness. That's all well and good. But just because we want to do the kind thing does not ensure we will know what the kind thing is. How are we to know what the right thing is, the kind thing is to choose or say or do in any circumstance? Easy. The more we play with mindfulness and meditation, and as little as once every 12 hours, the more we experience with right effort or effortless effort, wherein our choices and utterances and deeds flow, not from contrived calculations, not from wild scatteredness, but instead from love's deeply centered spontaneity. Spontaneity, which is sometimes described as doing without doing, or wu wei, or going with the flow, or being in the zone, or expedient means. And so we see that simply by playing with mindfulness and meditation, the remaining 6 folds of the path are practiced optimally and sustainably and effortlessly. But what about enlightenment? Well, what if enlightenment was simply mastery of Proto-Buddhism's 8-fold path of enlightenment? You see, all humans are wired for mastery. All humans are wired as children to get so good at using the toilet instead of their diapers, brushing their teeth, tying their shoes, riding a bike, reading, writing, and arithmetic. They are so wired to do these things that we get so good at them that we're able to practice them spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively, which is the essence of mastery. The Buddha taught in the second to the last passage, the penultimate passage, of his discourse on the 4 bases of mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutta, that one could master this path in as little as 7 days. But don't worry, there's always going to be grouchy people to tell you it can't be done. Let's prove them wrong, shall we? And having explained the essence of the Buddha's path, together let's practice. Just as we might warm up before we work out, let's warm up our mind by playing with 4 rhetorical questions concerning impermanence. The first rhetorical question, how could lots always change, is divided between our inhalation and our exhalation. Rhetorical questions, by definition, are not the objects of analysis. Their power lies not in us striving to answer them, but as passively reciting them, even if we recite them silently. Let us shift gears now from the circumstantial to the physical. Let us shift gears from the physical to the interpersonal. Fourthly, let us shift gears from the interpersonal to the mental. For the remainder of this morning's, or let's rephrase this, for the majority of the remainder of this morning's live stream, let us simply sit and notice and breathe and notice and relax. On this path, we do not play with our energy in an effort to contrive bliss or contrive trance. But we do sometimes play with energy just to help us to enhance the sustainability of sitting, which for those of us who juggle various disabilities, that can be a challenge. The first place we're going to gently invite our real or imagined energies to gather is at our crown. To do that, we're going to use 2 methods. The first method is by subtly adjusting our respiratory frame of reference, which is a fancy way of saying every time we feel air enter our nostrils, let's silently and mentally recite the verb noticing, and every time we feel air exit our nostrils, let's silently and mentally recite the word relaxing. Does that mean we concentrate on our nostrils? No. Does that mean we concentrate on these 2 verbs? No. We treat our nostrils, we treat these verbs the way a piano student treats their metronome. They are peripherally aware of their metronome, but they're so busy with their hands and the keys and the sight reading that they just can't concentrate on it. And that's ideal because remember, our job is to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, fleetingly notice whatever comes up. Whatever perceptions, emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, or imaginings cartwheel across the stage of our mind. So no concentration. We're simply using our nostrils and these verbs as a tool, not to make us notice and relax, for our autonomic nervous system already does that quietly in the background, like an app running on our smartphone. Then why do we play with our nostrils and these verbs? To remind our will, to remind our intention, to remind our volition, to take a relaxing break from the exhausting habit of actively competing against our own autonomic nervous system, instead to passively cooperate with it. At least for a few minutes, at least once every 12 hours. Think of it simply as an act of neurological hygiene. What is the second tool we're going to use? Simple, our fingers. Let's use the tip of our left index finger to support the lower knuckle of our right index finger, palms up in our lap. The free fall of mindfulness and meditation can feel very jarring to our rigid and controlling tendencies. And it could excite in us the fear that in the span of time that feels like merely the blink of an eye, a century could have passed us by. A useful way to allay this fear is to practice a variation of Bengali crease counting. In addition to using our left index finger to support our right index finger, we could also use our left thumb to keep track of our first set of 12 inhalations by placing that left thumb upon the lower set of creases of its little finger. Where do we count the actual 12 inhalations? On our right hand. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb noticing during our inhalation, we can advance our thumb across the sets of creases found on the underside of our fingers. Now, I recommend keeping your hands palms up in your lap. That's most comfortable. I'm just lifting my hands up to make it easier for you to follow along for about a minute or so. As you see, my right thumb has come to the final set of creases on the underside of its right index finger. Therefore, it's time to advance my left thumb to the next set of creases on its little finger. And so you see how it's possible to count 12 sets of 12 inhalations each. gathering 12 sets of 12 inhalations will take us approximately 12 minutes. But what if you want to spend more than 12 minutes with our energy coalesced at our crown? Simple. To keep track of our second collection of 12 sets of 12 inhalations, we could slide the tip of our left index finger up to our right index finger's second knuckle. And similarly, if we wanted to gather a third collection of 12 sets of 12 inhalations, we could slide the tip of our left index finger up our right index finger to its third knuckle. Each time, hands palms up in our lap. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 6 minutes or so. To keep track of our crown's second collection of 12 sets of 12 inhalations, we could slide the tip of our left index finger up to the second knuckle of our right index finger, palms up in our lap. Remember, the moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 6 minutes or so. Let us now shift gears and gently invite our real or imagined subtle energy to coalesce in our chest. First, to do this, we will adjust our respiratory frame of reference, which is a fancy way of saying every time our chest swells during inhalation, we can silently and mentally recite the verb noticing. And every time our chest subtly sinks as gently we exhale, we can silently and mentally recite the verb relaxing. We can also adjust our fingers to help with this energy work. Instead of using our index finger, our left index finger, we can use our left middle finger to support the lower knuckle of our right middle finger, palms up in our lap. The free fall of mindfulness and meditation can feel very jarring to our tendencies to be rigid and controlling. A useful workaround is to practice a variation of Bengali crease counting. Consider again our left hand. In addition to supporting our right middle finger, its thumb could touch the lower set of creases on his little finger, thus keeping track of our first set of 12 inhalations. Where do we count the actual inhalations? On our right hand. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb noticing during our inhalation, we can advance our right thumb across the sets of creases on the underside of our fingers. To get a feel for this, let us practice together right now for about a minute. Starting with our right little finger. Having come to the third set of creases on my right index finger, I've got no place else to place my thumb. Therefore, I return my attention to my left hand and advance my left thumb. Thus, we can count 12 sets of 12 inhalations each, for a total of approximately 12 minutes. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you. In approximately 10 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's dusk explanation and group practice of meditating like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.